Ernest Evans, the last stand of the USS Johnston. The sky above the Philippine Sea burned red that morning, October 25, 1944. The battle off Samar. It was the day when courage alone stood against an empire, and at the center of it was one man, Captain Ernest E. Evans, commander of the destroyer USS Johnston, DD 557. From the very beginning, Evans was not an ordinary officer. He was half Cherokee, half Irish, a man of fire and conviction. When he took command of the Johnston, he told his crew, "This is going to be a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way. And anyone who doesn't want to go along better get off right now." No one left. The Johnston was small, just a destroyer, barely a fraction of the massive Japanese battleships it would one day face. But under Evans, she had the heart of a lion. Part I, the calm before the storm. The dawn over Leyte Gulf was deceptive, calm seas, soft winds, and the hum of engines rolling through the mist. The men of the Taffy 3 escort group were relaxed. They were there to protect the landing troops on Leyte Island, slow escort carriers, a few destroyers, and smaller destroyer escorts. No one expected a real fight, but beyond the horizon, a storm of steel was approaching. Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force, 4 battleships, including the Yamato, the largest warship ever built, 8 cruisers, and 11 destroyers, had slipped past the main U.S. fleet. They were coming straight for Taffy 3. At 6:45, lookouts on the Johnston saw flashes on the northern horizon, the sun glinting off metal. Then came the radio call, "Enemy ships. Bearing 015. Range 17 miles." Evans grabbed his binoculars. Through the haze, he saw them, towering silhouettes of Japanese battleships and cruisers, their guns already turning. He didn't wait for orders. "All engines ahead, flank. Prepare for action." The destroyer's turbines roared to life, churning white foam behind her as Evans swung the ship toward the enemy. Part 2, into the fire. The Johnston sped forward alone, a single destroyer charging into a fleet that could crush her with a single broadside. As the first Japanese shells screamed overhead, geysers of water exploded around the ship. The men on deck felt the shock waves rattle their bones, but Evans didn't flinch. "Commence firing." 5-inch guns thundered. The destroyer's rapid volley slashed into the lead cruiser Kumano, tearing into her bow. Then Evans ordered, "Torpedoes, fire when ready." 10 torpedoes streaked through the waves, leaving white trails behind them. Moments later, one struck home. A massive explosion tore through the Kumano, blowing off her bow and forcing her out of the battle. Evans had done the impossible, a lone destroyer wounding a heavy cruiser. But now the entire Japanese fleet turned their guns toward him. Part 3, the sea turns red. Hells the size of cars came crashing down. One struck Johnston's bridge, wounding Evans. Shrapnel shredded his face, one arm hung useless, but he refused to leave his post. Blood running down his cheek, he took the helm himself and barked orders through clenched teeth, "Keep firing. Don't give them an inch." The ship shuddered under hits, engines were damaged, the aft guns were silenced, but the Johnston kept moving, twisting through explosions, darting between smoke and flame. Then the radio crackled, "Taffy 3 to all ships, commence attack." Inspired by Evans's charge, the other destroyers, Hull, Heermann, and the tiny escort Samuel B. Roberts, joined the fight. Together, they charged a fleet 10 times their size. Overhead, the little escort carriers launched their planes, Wildcats and Avengers armed with nothing but machine guns and depth charges, diving straight into the battleships like angry hornets. It was chaos, a maelstrom of gunfire, smoke, and bravery. Part 4, a captain's resolve. Inside the Johnston, damage reports came faster than anyone could count. The deck was slick with oil and blood. Fires burned everywhere, but when the gunners shouted that they were out of armor-piercing shells, Evans said, "Load whatever we've got. Keep shooting." They fired star shells, practice rounds, anything that could leave the barrel. Every man aboard knew the truth, they weren't going to make it out, but under Evans, surrender was never an option. As the Japanese fleet advanced, their gunners began targeting the carriers, the slow, defenseless heart of Taffy 3. Evans turned the Johnston again, placing his burning destroyer between the enemy and his fleet. "We're going in again." One officer protested. The ship was barely afloat. Evans glared at him, his face half hidden by blood and smoke. "We're not done yet." Part 5, the last stand. The Johnston roared forward one last time, her guns still barked, Her crew still fought. They hit another cruiser, setting it ablaze. They even forced the mighty Yamato to turn away temporarily, confused by the sheer audacity of the attack, but the end was inevitable. Shell after shell tore through the destroyer's hull. One ripped open the engine room, another exploded near the stern. Water rushed in. Evans gave his final order: abandon ship. He stayed on the bridge as the Johnston began to roll. Survivors later said he was still at the helm, still fighting to the last second, his hand on the wheel, the ship going down beneath him. At 10:10 a.m., the USS Johnston slipped beneath the waves. Out of her crew of 327, only about 141 survived. Captain Ernest Evans was never seen again. Part 6, Legacy. When the smoke cleared, the impossible had happened. The Japanese force, confused, battered, and believing they faced a much larger fleet, turned away. The courage of Taffy 3 had saved thousands of American lives. Years later, one Japanese admiral would say, "In that battle, the American destroyers attacked like wolves. I had never seen anything like it." For his heroism, Captain Ernest E. Evans was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the United States. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." To his men, though, he was more than a hero. He was a leader who led from the front, a man who charged into certain death to protect others. Today, the name USS Johnston lives on, not as a wreck at the bottom of the sea, but as a symbol of what courage truly means, because on that October morning in 1944, when the odds were impossible and defeat was certain, one man stood on the bridge of his ship and said, "In spirit if not in words, we are the line. And we will not break." Hans Langsdorff, the honor of the Admiral Graf. Spee. The South Atlantic was silent before dawn. The sea rolled under a gray horizon, and the battleship Admiral Graf. Spee cut through the waves like a shadow, her steel hull gleaming faintly beneath the rising sun. At her bridge stood Captain Hans Wilhelm Langsdorff, hands clasped behind his back, eyes steady on the endless water ahead. He was a man born of discipline and duty, precise, proud, but also deeply human. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Langsdorff did not see war as glory. He saw it as burden. And yet, as the Second World War raged across Europe, he commanded one of Germany's most powerful and feared warships. Part I, the raider of the South Atlantic. The Graf Spee was no ordinary ship. A Panzerschiff, a pocket battleship, faster than any battleship that could catch her, and stronger than any cruiser that could outrun her. Her mission was simple: disrupt Allied shipping, sever their supply lines, and sow chaos across the oceans. From September 1939, Langsdorff's ship prowled the Atlantic like a phantom. He struck with precision. Merchant ships disappeared one by one. But Langsdorff was no butcher. Every time his ship intercepted a vessel, he made sure the crews were taken aboard safely. Not one civilian was killed under his command. His men admired him for that, a warrior who still carried a conscience. He treated prisoners well, fed them from his own stores, and allowed them to send letters home. Even in war, he believed in honor. But by December, the hunter was being hunted. Part 2, the trap. British intelligence had been tracking Graf Spee's movements. The Royal Navy dispatched 3 cruisers, HMS Ajax, HMS Achilles, and HMS Exeter, to intercept her. On the morning of December 13, 1939, near the coast of South America, they found her. At 6:14. Lookouts on the Graf Spee sighted 3 masts on the horizon. Langsdorff studied them through his binoculars. "Enemy cruisers," he said calmly. Then, louder, "Action stations." Klaxons blared across the ship. The crew ran to their posts. The great 11-inch guns swung toward the enemy, and within minutes, the quiet sea erupted into thunder. Part 3, the Battle of the River Plate. The British ships charged ahead, forming a wide triangle to encircle their prey. The Graf Spee's first salvo roared, a flash of fire and steel. Shells screamed across the water, slamming into the Exeter, tearing open her turrets and bridge. Smoke poured from her decks, but the British pressed on. The Ajax and Achilles, smaller but faster, zigzagged through the waves, firing continuously. Explosions surrounded the German ship. Langsdorff remained on the bridge, his uniform immaculate despite the chaos, issuing commands with calm precision: maintain course. Fire at will. Another salvo from the Graf Spee, another hit. The Exeter was crippled, burning from bow to stern. For a moment, it looked like victory. Then, fate turned. A British shell smashed into the control tower, fragments ripped through the bridge. Langsdorff was thrown to the floor, blood running down his face. His men rushed to him, but he waved them away. "Keep firing," he ordered, staggering back to his post. The Graf Spee was bleeding, her fuel system damaged, ammunition running low. Langsdorff knew he couldn't survive another full engagement. At 7:40, he ordered a smoke screen. Under cover of black clouds, the Graf Spee turned south, retreating toward neutral waters near Montevideo, Uruguay. Part 4, Refuge in Montevideo. By the afternoon, the Graf Spee limped into the River Plate estuary, her hull scorched, her crew exhausted. Langsdorff requested refuge under international law, a brief stay to make repairs. The Uruguayan government allowed him 72 hours, but outside the harbor, the trap was closing. British ships gathered just beyond the neutral zone. Radio broadcasts, some real, some faked, claimed that a massive British fleet was waiting just outside the river, ready to annihilate the Graf Spee the moment she sailed. Inside the ship, morale wavered. Langsdorff's officers debated options: fight, surrender, or internment. Langsdorff listened in silence. Then he said quietly, "I will not let my men die in a hopeless battle." He faced an impossible choice: duty to his country, or the lives of his crew. Part V, the final decision. On the evening of December 17, Langsdorff gathered his officers in the wardroom. He looked around the table, young men, exhausted, loyal, ready to die if he ordered it. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but heavy, "I have decided to scuttle the ship." The room went silent. He continued, "The Graf Spee will not fight a battle she cannot win. We will not surrender her to the enemy. And no man under my command will die pointlessly." The officers nodded. Some cried quietly. They all understood. At sunset, Langsdorff ordered the evacuation. The crew was ferried ashore to Buenos Aires, leaving their proud ship behind, stripped of her ammunition, her engines rigged with explosives. That night, as the world watched, the Admiral Graf Spee steamed slowly out of Montevideo harbor, her guns silent. 1955, charges detonated. A column of fire and smoke rose into the sky as the mighty warship settled beneath the waves. The ship was gone, but her honor remained intact. Part 6. The captain's farewell for Langsdorff. The decision carried a heavy cost. He had saved his crew, all but 36 would live to see the end of the war. But in the eyes of his superiors, he had defied orders. In his own heart, he had lost his ship, his pride, his purpose. On December 19, 1939, in a small hotel room in Buenos Aires, Hans Langsdorff dressed in his immaculate naval uniform. He laid the German flag across his bed. He wrote letters to his family, to his superiors, and to his crew. In one, he said, "For a captain, there is no greater honor than to share the fate of his ship." Then he lay down upon the flag and ended his life with a single pistol shot. He was 45 years old. Part 7, Legacy of Honor. The death of Hans Langsdorff shocked the world. Even his enemies paid tribute to him. British newspapers called him a gallant and chivalrous officer. Admiral Harwood, who had fought against him at the River Plate, sent condolences to his family. Langsdorff's men, saved by his decision, never forgot him. They remembered not the defeat, but the dignity with which he faced it, a commander who placed honor above pride, and humanity above hatred. Decades later, the wreck of the Graf Spee still rests off the coast of Uruguay, its rusted hull a silent monument. Tourists come and go, but for those who know the story, it remains sacred ground, a place where one man's sense of honor overcame the madness of war. Hans Langsdorff, captain, warrior, and man of conscience, fought not just an enemy fleet, but the storm within his own soul, and in the end, he won the only victory that truly mattered, the victory of honor over destruction.